So we're going to get started with introductions. We won't take long with this. My name is Courtney. I am from PropAcademy. I'm passionate about three things. You've got people, property, and getting things done, normally my way. So that's a bit about me. I'm from PropAcademy, which is an online training provider. You should know them if you've joined the meeting, but if not, we can always stay after and answer some questions about that. I'm now going to hand over to the speakers of the day. So we're going to start with Charlotte for your introduction.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Courtney mentioned, I am Charlotte and I'm from PropAcademy as well. I'm a sales representative here. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today on how to identify red flag tenants, which I'm sure everyone is super interested in. Today with us, we have Marizelle and Alison from SBL Incorporated. So thank you so much.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Alison Laxton. I am an associate attorney here with SBL. You can read more on our website about us, but we are super excited to give some insight to you guys and hope that you can learn a lot today about how to keep those red flag tenants away from your clients' properties.
Thank you, Ali. Yes, so my name is Marizelle Kutzer. I am also from SBL Incorporated. I'm the HR and marketing manager with quite a few years of rental management experience behind my name as well. I'm working in the Cape Town branch, and it's also quite gloomy and rainy this side today. So Courtney, you're not alone with that weather, but yeah, we're super excited to be here, and we always enjoy spending time with you. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Charlotte, could you just adjust your mic a little bit lower for me, please?
Is that
perfect?
Better?
That's a bit better. Thank you. Okay, you can carry on.
Okay, perfect. So we're just going to dive into the questions today, just so we can get the ball rolling. Marizelle, the first one is for you. How can you tell if a tenant's bank statement has been digitally altered without using expensive verification software?
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for this. So yes, these are quite bullet point things, so don't worry. We from SBL shared a PDF with Charlotte and Courtney that they're going to share with you afterwards. But I'm going to just quickly dive through these bullet points in short, but the PDF will explain everything to you afterwards. So the first thing when looking at the bank statement, remember that the bank statement tells a story about your applicant. So firstly is to check the fonts. It's usually best to get a PDF, and when you make sure the fonts are absolutely correct, the spacing and the columns align, and make sure that it is consistent, obviously, because if you see that there's anything edited, there will be weird spacings and awkward fonts, and the thickness of the words might differ. So that's quite one thing to check. Secondly, is make sure, like when you zoom into the PDF document of the bank statement, that the logos aren't blurry. So make sure it is very clear and visible logos. If it is blurry, you could assume that it can be a screenshot that's been taken, cropped, and then pasted onto the altered bank statement. One thing that fraudsters don't always do is they will adjust the amount next to, let's say, for example, their income and their payroll, but they don't adjust the amount or recalculate the amount at the bottom. So if you assume or you think that something has been altered, calculate. I know it will take a few minutes because usually there's quite a lot of transactions, but take the time and make sure that the total at the bottom also correlates to what the amounts are in each line item. Then another thing is with the PDF, it's quite cool. So when you highlight the text, it needs to highlight each line item. You can also paste it in a Word document. Again, it will jump around, and that's fine when you paste it in the Word document. But make sure that the amounts and the line items that you've highlighted in the PDF also pastes the same in the Word document. If you cannot highlight it and it just kind of highlights like a block, it usually means it's an image, which can also show that it's been altered with. And then lastly, make sure that the employer name on the salary or the payslip also correlates with the employer's name as the line item description in the bank statement. Usually there can be one or two small tweaks in it, but if it really differs quite a lot, that's also one assumption that you can make to say, maybe this isn't the original one. I hope that makes sense.
Definitely, thank you. So there's definitely a lot of stuff to look out for, but you've definitely ironed that out very nicely. Thank you.
No
So what
problem.
would you say are the subtle lifestyle clues in a bank statement or a social media profile that might contradict the income and employment information on an application?
Yeah, so obviously when you check the pay slips, you will see that they receive a certain salary, usually after deductions. So their net income also needs to show exactly the same as in their bank statements. So if you don't see that, usually the other one would be smaller incomes, and then you know it can either be personal transactions or an informal business. But if you then check social media, and please use social media in this regard to your advantage, go stalk them. Be a stalker, that's okay. But if you then see that they go on these luxurious holidays and they have expensive shoes on their story, then you can really beg the question, is there a consistency in their lifestyle? So check their payslip. Make sure that the payslip amount, the salary amount, also refers back to their bank statement and it correlates. If not, and they're small incomes, it begs the question, is it really an income? Is it informal income? And then check the social media to make sure that the type of lifestyle they proclaim to have on social media actually correlates with the income they receive.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. You definitely want to make sure that what you're receiving is exactly what you're seeing on their socials. So that's a great way to look at it.
100%.
So why should you call past landlords rather than the current one when doing reference checks? And how can this reveal any hidden evictions or any hidden disputes?
Yeah, you see, so usually this is quite one that I've also experienced when I was doing rental management and I was vetting the tenants that I placed, is tenants aren't always very keen on giving past landlords details. They say, well, I won't have it anymore. And usually what you can do is you can ask for previous lease agreements. So you don't necessarily have to ask for the landlord's particular details, just ask for their previous lease agreement. So remember, there's a difference between phoning their current landlord, where they currently stay and thinking of moving out, and their past landlord. So remember, a current landlord might be in the mindset of, I just want to offload this problem tenant to someone else. So they will give this glowing review of the tenant. There's really no issue in the property. We have a good relationship. Everything is fine. But back at the ranch, there's maybe more going on. Whereas a past landlord, meaning the ex-landlord, they don't really have anything to gain by being dishonest. So those are the people that you really want to contact. And then just ask specific questions like, were there any property damages? And if there were any, were there any disputes when you had to pay out the deposit? Did they in fact get their deposit back? And one thing that I learned that's really put them in quite a corner, but it's okay, is ask the landlord, but did your tenant give you the fair notice period? Like, did they give you the notice period? Or did they just at one point decided, well, I'm going to send my landlord a WhatsApp giving 1 week's notice and move out because I found this new property? Because that will also give you an indication of the type of tenant that you're going to place. So it's not just about what you see on paper, it's really about their demeanor as a tenant in the property, and do they really take care of the property? Another thing that you can ask is, how did they behave whenever they got friends? Like, did the friends or family members, the visitors, really obey to the same rules and clauses as you stipulated in the lease agreement? Because whatever clause is in the lease agreement for the tenant also counts for their visitors. So really try and get those contact details of the ex-landlord, meaning the second last landlord, and not just the last or current landlord, because the current landlord might just want to give this glowing review to pass this problem tenant on to you.
Yeah. I can't be shy of the fact that sometimes that's also crossed my mind as a landlord. But I do relate to what you're saying as well. I think it's quite hard for the agent though, because they obviously are trying so hard to fill the spot. And, and I've heard of some people saying, no, landlord checks, the new landlord doesn't actually care about previous landlord checks. So there's no need to check anymore. So I think, the kind of ethics that you're speaking to now is so good to uphold in an agency itself, because then, it's not just about placing the next tenant, but you want your landlord to say, listen, they're not going to put anyone in. You might miss a month or half a month's rental, but at least whoever they're putting in is of very high quality. And
Absolutely.
I think that's better than a quick paycheck. I mean, when everyone asks me about PropAcademy, I say, I'm not here for a quick buck. There's no way. I'm here for a lifetime. So you need to have a look and see, what are you going to do? Can you face that person in 12 months or 6 months time when they say, but didn't you check X, or how has this happened? So I think that's an excellent point that you've brought up.
Thank you. And if I may just quickly add to that is why it's so important to make sure that the lease agreement that you have is so watertight. Because if you then ask for the tenant that's now applying for your property for their current lease agreement that's supposed to now come to an end, and you see, well, the notice period is, for example, 2 months in that lease agreement, but the tenant is applying now, and you phone that landlord and you say, listen, your current tenant, this and this and this person, applied for my property. Are you aware of them looking for a new property? And it happened more often than not that landlords told me, no, I'm not aware. Now, it makes sense sometimes that tenants will first shop around before they open a can of worms with their landlords. But then as the landlord, well, they need to wait 2 months for this tenant to eventually move in, and is this really what you want to wait that period? So there's all of those small nuances that you can really pick up in a lease agreement.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you both very, very much. We are just going to direct this question now to Alison. I think we're going to jump back to Marizelle just now. But Alison, what patterns in a credit report might indicate that a tenant is deliberately hiding debt or has recently taken over any risky new credit?
Okay, so I personally love the National Credit Act. I'm a bit of an NCA nerd. And so many people don't interpret everything holistically. It's not just your credit score. It is the information on that detailed credit report that you need to be looking at. And you should also know what a debt to income ratio is. Okay, so when lenders look at you, they are looking at you as how high risk are you? As a landlord, you should take the same approach. Someone who has multiple accounts with Foschini, somebody has a car payment, they've got something else that they're paying off. All of these accounts tell a story, and if they've all been opened up in a very short space of time, especially things like store cards or personal loans, that is not paying off an asset. That is financial desperation, which means you are borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and nobody should be taking on a tenant who is one missed salary away from financial ruin, because you're going to be suffering as a result and you're not going to get your rent. And unfortunately, you're going to then have to evict that person, and they're going to be staying in your place for those months while you get those attorneys on it. So credit scores are not just green, red, and yellow. You need to look at those accounts. How many have been opened? What is the debt to income ratio? Is this a high risk lender? Is this someone who takes out a lot of credit? Because that shows you that they are living from paycheck to paycheck and they're paying too much of that disposable income over to those credit providers. Also have a look at the last 3 months. If there's been a spike in their credit usage, or they have missed or no payments on their credit profile, then that is a red flag. And some applicants will also try to trick their landlords when they apply by paying off certain debts to appear more creditworthy. But the report's going to show this. Okay, so what a lot of people do not know, and I'd love to share this information with anyone who is a credit consumer, because South Africa is a very high credit using country, is you can go into clearscore.co.za for free forever. You can check your own personal credit score and you can see how to improve your credit worthiness, okay? It is such a fantastic platform, and I also urge our agents to go and make use of that platform so you can inform yourself as to what does it look like to be a low-risk credit lender as opposed to someone who's high risk. Another thing people do not know, they get a loan, they pay it off, and they close the account. When you do that, the credit record does not become available to lenders to look at after that. So if you are paying off your debt, sometimes it can worsen your credit score because we come back to debt to income ratio. So if you have paid off an account or you have a tenant who's paid off an account, ask them for those statements from the bank as proof that that account was paid off. So you can actually see, did they meet the minimum requirements every month? Were they paying the minimum amounts, or did they put lump sums in? That's also going to give you a good idea as to, are you taking on a risky tenant? Now, foreigners, just want to mention this as well. Someone without a credit record, hugely risky. Okay, we've seen it before. If somebody doesn't have an established credit record in South Africa, you should be looking at getting a suretyship for them to make sure that you are not giving your property to someone who actually is quite nefarious. So I hope that that clarifies.
Definitely. Thank you. Does anyone want to add anything there? Okay, we all good?
We're all good. The questions that are coming in, just to let you know, and let the audience know, the questions that are coming in, thank you so much. What we're going to do is we're going to get through the questions that we've set for today, and then there's a special amount of time at the end where we're going to go through them. So please feel free to continue to write to us. I will thumbs up. That means I've copy pasted it and sent it to Charlotte.
Thank you, Courtney. Marizelle, we're going to jump back to you quickly. So I know you mentioned social media, and it's good to do a good stalk of your client before you proceed with them. But how can a quick LinkedIn or online search help confirm whether the applicant's job title, employment dates, or company actually exist?
So I want to mention in this regard, Charlotte, if you're not really on social media, this is really where you can just get a nice feel for how social media can really be beneficial, especially if we look at a place like LinkedIn. The general rule of thumb on LinkedIn is for you to portray yourself as an employee or then an employer of a business. So if someone is obviously applying for your property and they say they work at ABC company, go onto LinkedIn, search your applicant and see if they've added it ABC company as their employer. Click on ABC company, the profile, and check if they actually have a profile on LinkedIn. Now, we also need, and from a marketing point of view, I know that not all companies are very active on social media, for example, LinkedIn. So that is okay. But check whether the start date of your applicant on their payslip, for example, or their application correlates to their start date on LinkedIn. Then you go onto Google and you just typically search the company and you see if they actually have a website presence or a Google presence. Another platform, there's so many platforms where you can actually check if a company really exists. One that I can think of now is B2B Hint, but I know that you have to pay a certain amount to see all the details, but at least B2B Hint, like a 2, will actually just give you an idea to say, yes, it's a valid company or not. Now, what to do if the company doesn't have a website, there's no phone number, it's basically non-existent, well, then obviously you phone the number that should be on the payslip, or then you ask in your application form or for the tenant for the HR contact details. Now, where the red flag comes in is if they are reluctant to give that to you, and if they don't want to give it to you, and like, we don't really have an HR or don't really have a manager, then you know, okay, well, this is a very much a big flag, and then you can circle that, and you can actually make your decision based on that, because then there's no way for you to prove if the income that they disclose to have is really valid, or if they're really not busy with something fishy. So employment confirmation is so crucial. But if you can't get it from your payslip, go onto LinkedIn, use Google, use platforms. You can even, if I may say it, use your ChatGPT friend or your AI friend and ask ChatGPT, does this company with this phone number, with this specific website actually exist? And I'm sure, I've never done that, but I'm sure ChatGPT might be able to also give you some answers.
ChatGPT is a great tool and it's integrating into everyone's lives.
It's your friend away from home.
There we go. Alison, we're going to jump back to you for a sec. What are the red flags in application forms with regards to handwriting, formatting, or wording that might indicate that it was rushed, filled out by someone else, or copied from another source?
Okay, so you don't have to be a handwriting expert, but I think that this is where trusting your intuition and perhaps asking your colleagues for some guidance if you see something that doesn't look quite right. If you see that they have different handwriting styles, so the first few pages are cursive and the last few pages are beautiful print, then that is a bit strange. Inconsistent use of capital letters, for example, or if there's overly perfect handwriting, it can show you that the form was not filled in personally, and there may be pre-typed answers that they have also included in the application form that may show that there's something nefarious or fraudulent going on there. Also, vague or incomplete responses to open questions. So the more detail an applicant is willing to share with you, the better. If they're not willing to give you reasons as to why they left their last property, those are red flags as well. So genuine applicants, as a rule of thumb, will be happy to give you the detail. Even if things did go badly, take it as a good sign that that person is being honest with you. We know just as there are no perfect tenants, there are also no perfect landlords. So just as you can get nightmare tenants, you can get nightmare landlords as well, okay? I know of a few people who have horror stories about renting, So the more detail they give you, the better. See that as an open book, as a good sign that the person is willing to play open cards with you. A fraudster or someone who is used to tricking landlords to get those nice properties and then will not leave, they are going to be someone who's going to keep answers short, very vague. They may tell you stories that don't add up. Things may not add up on the form. And if you feel like something in your gut is giving you that flashing light to say something is wrong, always rely on your senior colleagues. Go to them, ask them. We've got agents in the room with us who have decades of experience who can tell you from a mile away if that person is a red flag applicant or not. But finding those small signs, paying attention to detail will save you a lot of heartache in the end.
Amazing. Thank you.
And I also find, don't miss the rental world, hey? I also find that when we always had like that sense of urgency, like it needs to happen now, like someone's on their way with a moving truck, okay, but we didn't confirm anything yet, or all of those is like, whoa, step back out of your emotional bubble that you've been placed into, and like you say, look for someone more senior or more experienced. Sit down, tell the story from the beginning, because they're not in the same bubble you're in. And we always used to say red flag clients. If someone's screaming at you, if a staff member phones me and they're upset, then there's something wrong. Sit down, let's take a step back, figure out what's right, what's wrong. But normally they use those high intense emergency situations, and then we always label them as red flags. And most of the time when it's come to that, they really are red flag clients.
Absolutely. So don't let somebody else's crisis become your problem. And just remember that it may be a pain to have an empty apartment for a month or two, but I can tell you right now it's way worse to evict someone. And so you would much rather have your crickets in the flat than unlawful occupants. So as Courtney has said, people who rush you, don't give you time to consider things, who seem overly pushy or vague, that is a huge red flag, and you have to rely on your gut and also your industry experience, and soon enough you'll see these people coming from a mile away.
Well, thank you both. That was very informative. I know it is quite scary when you come across a red flag client anywhere. So thank you. We do appreciate that. Alison, why should you request original PDFs or direct downloads of bank statements instead of scanned copies? And how does the metadata help detect tampering?
I think what's important here is in today's digital age, we have seen such an increase in fraudulent documentation. You can't just take something that's been stamped as certified anymore, because those also get used fraudulently. So asking for those original banks PDFs will give you insight into the document's authenticity. So they will contain metadata, and metadata is going to tell you when was the creation date, who is the issuing bank, the branch code. That's all very difficult to fake if you have the original document on hand. Any scanned copies or screenshots can be manipulated rather. So even PDFs are not foolproof. They're very easy to manipulate. We see it all the time with fake statements and proof of payments, etc. So what you can then do, I'm far from an IT person, but for our lay people here, is just right click on the document, ask to see the document properties there on your PC in a PDF reader. And then you can always see, was that file modified after creation? If there is no metadata at all, it's often because the original document was altered and resaved as a simple image, and that should be somewhat of a red flag. So please, you're going to get all this documentation. I know that people here are not going to be authenticity experts, but just rely on the guidelines we're giving you. If you see something seems off or it's a scanned image of something, just be a little bit wary about it. You want those original PDFs, and if they can forward you the document from the email that the bank has sent, and it has a QR code, for example, to verify what you are looking at, that's a plus as well. So a lot of banks are now doing that with all the fraud. They will give you a QR code that you can scan to say this is a legitimate document.
Amazing. I didn't even know you could do that with a PDF, so that is very exciting. Marisol, we're going to jump back to you quickly. How can you spot inconsistencies between tenants' declared expenses and their actual lifestyle or spending habits?
A very good question. Thank you for that, Charlotte. So I want to mention, like, usually, and I remember back in the day, so usually what you would do is you will take the credit report and you will check all the expenses, and you would like, okay, this is now all the expenses. Okay, this is the income. Do your quick calculation. Okay, they look quite fine. That is why it's so important in your rental application to also have a section where the tenant needs to acknowledge and explain their own expenses. Because usually it can happen that they say, well, my monthly expenses only calculates to around 5,000 Rand, food, groceries, and maybe insurance. But this is where you need to bring in the bank statements, because you need to check, for example, medical aid. Now, medical aid is great because if your tenant has medical aid, it means they're a responsible person in life in general. But I mean, we all know how expensive medical aid is, and medical aid does not show on your credit report, not always. So that takes quite a huge chunk out of their monthly disposable income. If they say, for example, like, I don't have children, but you see there's payments made to schools and payments made to children clothing stores, where does the dots connect? So again, it is not like, yes, this is now a hard, solid no-go, but it's just like they are misrepresenting their reality, and they artificially inflate their affordability, which in the end puts you as the landlord or then the agent placing the tenant at risk. So it's always good to not just look at one document, let's say the credit report, and calculate. It's good, it's a good start, but also just check the bank statements to see, well, we do see quite a number of payments made to Blue Liquor, for example. So yeah, we might know kind of their habits there, especially on a Friday afternoon before a bride, a Friday or Saturday. Then okay, well, this tenant likes to enjoy life in their way, which is great, but will it be on this premises? And will it then obviously negatively impact the property? And again, if they choose to spend their money on liquor and those type of things in a very irresponsible way, will they have enough money to pay rental in the end? So I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily. It's just, is it done responsibly or irresponsibly to put you at risk as the agent or the landlord?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. It looks like we've just got the 2 questions left, and they are for Alison. So, Alison, why is it important to compare physical address on a credit report, any pay slips and utility bills? And what mismatches could indicate fraud or a high-risk applicant?
So I think that this is something a lot of people overlook, and nobody is able to live at 10 homes like a debtor who owes people money, right? So you'll find that the one bank statement has an address and it's actually the mom's address, and then the address that the employer has is his sister's address, and he gives you all these different stories as to why the addresses were used. We know as well that people who want their schools, kids to go to nice schools in government areas, you know, those government schools, they also ask friends who stay in the area, oh, don't you just want to give me an affidavit? And I'll say, that's my proof of address. So if you see on a credit report that there is there's a lot of different addresses, that they've moved around a lot, or that they seem to have moved around a lot, is definitely a red flag, because it's showing that they've either applied for lots of credit with different addresses. They might be evading service from the sheriff, which is something else that we deal with bad debtors. So you have to ask why and get that transparency. Another thing that tenants should be doing when they give you a lease agreement, they give you an application form, they should tell you who they're going to stay with if they're unable to pay that rent and have to move out, okay? And it is going to be difficult to evict someone who perhaps you don't have family in the country or in the province. So it's something you need to ask up front about and say, you know, where is your address now? We understand that you've been renting, you know, are these family addresses? Why all the different addresses? So it could mean instability from a creditworthiness perspective, or it could mean that they've been evicted or owe people lots of money. Now, also a utility bill. If it is in another person's name, please verify the relationship. We don't want to judge anyone. We know that plenty of people have all sorts of living arrangements now, but an affidavit will do, just to clarify exactly how that person is related. Is it a sister-in-law? Is it a life partner? Perhaps they aren't married yet, but they do live in a permanent life partnership relationship. That's something that you should just clarify as well. Fraudsters will often borrow documents from friends or relatives to appear more legitimate. So please be wary as well. If you have all these addresses and they don't come up on Google Maps or they don't exist. I had a client recently who placed a tenant in one of her places. The agent did not actually verify the address and said, oh, but that's their alternative accommodation. I said, well, you know, that actually does not exist. That street number does not exist on that road. So just go and do a Google Maps search and make sure that the number as well as the street is actually legitimate. Otherwise, they could be, you know, engaging in fraudulent documentation, using family and friends and co-workers' addresses to pull the wool over your eyes. So yeah, big red flag if they've got tons of addresses.
Well, sure, it seems like is this quite common? Is this kind of
Very
behavior quite common now these days?
That's
And
quite scary.
And another thing people will do is use company addresses. So just a heads up for those of you guys who are joining us, you know, if you are going to put a tenant into a residential property and they give you a long spiel about why it's better to be in the company's name, please make sure that you get a personal suretyship of sorts there. It is so easy for red flag tenants to hide behind companies. They rack up debt, they rack up landlord debt in a rental, and then they shut the company down. You don't have a surety, you haven't done your due diligence, and sorry for you, your money's gone and you cannot enforce it against that person. It's extremely expensive if you can do it at all. So when tenants come to you, we had someone ask about businesses applying for residential. It is a red flag, and you should be still having that personal suretyship in place, because ultimately you're not operating it as a business. You're giving that person a home to stay in. So people who hide behind business addresses as well, big red flag there.
Okay, well, yeah, it's definitely quite scary to see how sneaky people are getting. So even if the document looks absolutely perfect, what are some too good to be true signs that should trigger an investigation?
So Courtney raised one of the first ones, that rush to sign, right?
Okay.
We know that one of the best ways scam artists, criminals catch you, and it's not just in a property market, they will rush you. Okay, the scam that's doing the latest round, somebody phones you from the SAPS, you're going to be arrested, go into your bank account, right? They rush you, they put you on the spot to the point where they activate your fight or flight response, which overrides your brain's ability to logically think, and then they get you. So it is really important, as Courtney has said, to immediately say, that is that person's crisis. I'm not going to allow them to rush my client or myself, and I'm going to take our time to still ask them to do all the due diligence required. So that is the first thing. If everything looks perfect, but they are in this tremendous rush, red flag, investigate further, take a step back and breathe, okay? Rather have an empty apartment for a month than a nightmare tenant for the next few years. Also, high income, perfect credit, professional references. This person seems to be, like incredible. Just make sure that you look into that. I recently had a client of mine. She lives with her aged mother in Cape Town. They've lived on the property for many years. The mother's in her 80s. She's a landlord. And they had a woman who was incredibly respected in the rehabilitation community for drug abuse. And she was herself a rampant drug addict and gave them 5 years of hell. So if this person seems too good to be true, and you are already picking up red flags, and this person said to me, I thought this woman had a drug problem because of her behavior, because of her appearance, something didn't seem quite right. Even though everything on paper was perfect, just make sure that you double check. She had wished that she'd phoned her previous employer or previous landlord. She didn't do that. And if she had done that, she would have avoided this nightmare tenant for 5 years. Also, people who want to just pay you in advance without viewing the property. They push you to sign immediately, or they seem reluctant to answer personal questions. Then just slow the process down, verify everything twice, and remember your landlord's going to be making that decision based on how you advise him. So just say to your landlord, I know you're frustrated. This place has been empty for 6 months, but I think we should just hold off until we find someone who seems a little bit more steady. I don't like how pushy this person's being. I don't like that they want to shove money into our hands and move right in. Something doesn't seem quite right. And also, sometimes, like I've said, the absence of red flags can be a big red flag. Genuine applicants really rush you. They really want to shove a ton of money into your landlord's hands to say, here's my first month, here's my deposit, take everything now. And that's going to be a red flag in itself. We know if you've rented before, you do have to give a month's notice usually, then you have to move out, you have to pack up your stuff. It takes a more balanced approach. So those are all red flags. And like I've said, if you have something in your gut that is telling you, I don't get a good feeling about this person, rely on your colleagues to give you that second opinion. Just bounce it off of someone, because it's also your reputation, right? So I know landlords get frustrated. They want something to be let out and let out now, but you're going to lose your reputation if you just put anyone and everyone into landlords' properties and they say, oh, don't trust that agency, they just put whoever in the flat. So also manage your landlord's expectations. And I think that's important as well. You know what to look out for. You've got the industry experience. Hopefully you've learned more here today. But just make sure that you also say to them, I just get a feeling about this person. Something is too rushed. Something seems too good to be true. I think we should hold off for another tenant. And that would sort of be where I would go from there.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Courtney.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think you bring up some really, really good points there. I know when we rent our properties out, I always say if somebody is looking 2 months in advance, I'm happy, because that's somebody who's already planning their future, taking things seriously, having a much more balanced approach. Whereas if they're looking, oh, I'm stuck and I need a rental for 10 days, like I'm nowhere to be found. Because genuinely, if it happened to someone, there was a real story, of course I would be there for them. But you have to be able to separate the two. And why were you stuck? What were the problems? Is this an ongoing thing? Are you always stuck? Just to deal with it and dissect it a little bit like that. And then I think the other part that's quite difficult for an agent, which I think I touched on, but say, for example, you were to say, dear landlord, just give us an extra 2 months or so. We want to put someone ethical in, and another agency comes in and they've got a tenant ready to go. You kind of want to stop them and go, can I ask them the same questions I had to ask my tenant? So maybe when you're dealing with the landlord, you could raise concerns and say, I checked X, I checked Y, so that when he then deals with a different agent, he can say, but tell me about X and tell me about Y, so that then he can go, no, Courtney would have checked that. Then he's learning his trust. He's building trust with me. And then I always find once you've built trust, I had to try run away when I stopped being in property, because people will come to you 6-7 years later. They don't stop. Just phone Courtney, she got me an apartment in this place, she'll help you. And that's your word of mouth is your cheapest form of marketing and your most important. So trust me, down the line, it pays off. You don't want to be that person who pushed the boundary and I'm sure you ladies know more stories than me, but I even have family members who've just not had luck with rentals, and they've been stuck with squatters for 5-6 years in Johannesburg, and they cannot get these people out, even to the extent that the landlord's been arrested because he was aggressive to the state where he's lost his mind. You've literally taken everything from under them. So let's avoid, in our country, let's uplift the quality of tenants and avoid these sort of short fly-by-nights. They'll find another place to do it, but keep ours premium.
Absolutely.
100%.
And I just want to add, and it may not be a red flag per se, but when you are an agent and you're playing this role, you're essentially a matchmaker. So think of yourself as a courtship expert. And if you've got a landlord who has a beautiful Bantry Bay property with millions of rands worth of furnishings, you're not going to go and put a young family with 3 young kids in that home, or who have dogs who are going to chew the furniture, right? So it's also about matchmaking the family or the people that you're placing in that home to the type of landlord that you want. You ultimately want the landlord to have a happy tenant who loves them, who works well with them, who renews with them, who is happy to stay in that property. So if you know your landlord, you know what kind of tenant they're looking for. Don't try to put a square peg in a round hole. If that tenant is a wonderful tenant, but they're just not the right match for your landlord, and you can see the conflict is going to be incoming, just look for another tenant. Find that tenant a proper home for them to stay in, where the landlord's not going to be pedantic if the kids break something or if something goes wrong. It's all about matchmaking. And I think that goes just as far as your red flags, Is this actually setting up the parties for success for a long-term relationship? And that's going to have a huge impact on the level of trust people have in you as an agent to find that perfect tenant for them.
100%. All about transparency.
I think everything is.
Definitely. Well, I've certainly learned a heck of a lot from this session, so I appreciate your guys' time very much. It seems that we just have 1 or 2 questions from the chat that I just want to address. I don't know who wants to answer them. The first one is from Shane. He says there is an increase of applications on business credentials. What are the risks that we should be looking for?
I'm happy to take this one, Marisol.
Yeah. Go for it, Annie.
So the business credentials thing, like I've said, we have a really, really horrible trend in South Africa at the moment where people hide behind companies to evade creditors. So If you are getting a business application for a residential premises, that is a red flag. There should be a personal suretyship there somewhere, and you should be vetting that surety as well. Businesses that are recently opened up, that you can see have not been operating for very long. You can see that they maybe haven't done their annual returns. They're not compliant with the CIPC. Those are all red flags. So they don't have a tax number, for example, and they can't tell you why. Those are all things that you should be looking out for. So if you are, unsure as to how to do that compliance and checks on a business, we are always available to assist our clients and give you guidance on that. We also have some nice articles and chats that we do about it. But it is a red flag. And unfortunately, a lot of people in South Africa are using businesses to defraud creditors. So, I would say, unless you are doing a commercial premises, try and just get a personal application where somebody signs in their personal capacity and they take on that personal risk. There is no reason why someone who is self-employed cannot or should not be paying themselves a salary, and that salary can be allocated towards the rental owed to you. And so I think that would be my advice as an attorney, is to just don't put businesses in residentials, because we see so often the tenant doesn't pay, they fall into arrears, they move out, and then sorry for you, business is deregistered, you didn't get any suretyship. You just have to suck up that lost money, which is a very hard blow, especially in today's economic times for landlords.
Okay, thank you. So then we've just got the one left, and sorry, it's from Munene. He says, what happens when the current and or previous landlords don't want to provide any information about the tenant, for example, due to POPI Act?
I have this one because POPI gets quoted so incorrectly. Right, when you do a tenant check, you ask for consent, and you ask for consent to check these things. And so if you have someone who is hesitant to give that information because of POPI, you're going to say, but I have their written consent signed here, and I'm happy to present you with a copy of their signed consent form. If they still go on and make excuses, I don't think that's the right person that you should be placing in your place. It's a red flag, right? So people who hide behind legislation that is improperly, incorrectly cited is a red flag. And like I say, you're going to have that consent. So please just do make sure, a standard practice, when you do an application form, you do get that consent for credit checks and background checks, because if you don't and you do a credit check, unfortunately, you can be in trouble with the National Credit Regulator because it leaves a mark on their credit score. So make sure you get those signed consents, and make sure that your consent covers all of these background checks and not just a credit check as well.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you, ladies, very much. I don't see any other questions.
There's just one last question I've posted
that I missed. I'm sorry.
Shireen just quickly posted it, and then we can close off the meeting. Thank you.
Perfect. I haven't got it through yet.
I can read it out, Sha. I think it's from Shireen. She says, what are the threats when a client offers to pay the year's rent upfront due to a failed credit report? I'd be asking, which bank did you borrow from to pay me a year's upfront rent? That's a huge red flag. I don't think I'd even entertain that tenant. Because remember, it's not just your rental that's payable. They're going to be living in your property. They're going to be using water and electricity and refuse. And if there's levies, those costs may be passed on to the tenant as well. So you might have your year's rent and they might run up a 50,000 Rand water bill. And sorry for you, the municipality is going to say, I don't care. You're the landlord. You're the owner. You need to pay me. So if they have a failed credit report, sorry for you, unless they can give you suretyships and the sureties are nice and clean and will be staying in the property with them, I would avoid. I really don't think that is a good tenant. Marisol, maybe you've got some thoughts on someone like that. But my first instinct and question would be, well, who are you borrowing from to pay me that money?
And also, a very good point. Thank you for that, Ali. And remember that a year after year, what then? Now they need to pay for month 13 and 14,
Yes,
and
that's what
they
I was
haven't
going to
paid for
say.
that, so they haven't budgeted for it for the past year. So what then happens at month 13 or upon renewal when you, in any event, want to escalate the rental? So yeah, I 100% agree. I don't think that is the wisest. I think as eager as it and nice as it seems to have a year's rental upfront in your bank account, you don't know, maybe you could be part of money laundering for all that you know. So just make very certain about that. And if I may add to all of that, remember that your application process starts at your viewing, not just on what you see on paper. So follow your gut feeling when you do viewings of your properties, and that is why it's so important to meet your potential tenant in person. I remember in my days there was a tenant that came for a viewing, and the husband got out of the car with a beer bottle in his hand. I mean, immediately that gives you a type of vibe of what the potential tenant might be. So really trust your gut. Your application process starts at the viewing. That's why it's important to meet the tenant for a physical viewing, and do not just send photos and think it's beneficial for them to just see photos. If they are eager to rent out the property without doing a viewing, question that.
Sorry, and then just one very last one from Shane, which I'm going to squeeze in. We've only got a couple minutes left, so if we can stick to that. But what about parents applying for students?
As long as your parent is your surety, or they're undertaking to pay and be liable in terms of that lease, and they have a nice credit record, no problem at all. We have plenty of student lease agreements that we do. But yeah, just remember, if there's any red flags there, just avoid it, rather look for somebody else. But yeah, parents generally do apply on behalf of their children, and just make sure that your accommodation is suitable for student accommodation, right? So please don't go and put a student in your pedantic landlord's place if they're going to be having parties every Friday. And we know how young adults live, especially the boys. No offense to any men here, but you know, when the parents are away, the kids have lots of fun. So just make sure that your property is suitable. Make sure that you talk upfront about damages, especially because we know how student accommodation can be. But other than that, no problem at all. You can go ahead and use your checklists and credit checks to get the parent approved, and you know, happy studies to the child. So there we go.
That's
Amazing.
awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, everybody. Again, it's been so awesome to have you join us and help our audience. The feedback is just so positive. Everybody is seeming to have such a good time. So it's just lovely to have you join us, and we thank you so much for making the time and effort, especially just before a public holiday. Thank you to our audience for coming through. I mean, it's just so great that you've come through, and it's nice to see the same names and some of your friends and guests from other places to join and really talk about what we all enjoy the most. And this is our business, it's our career. So we want to build a great future together. And I like these little power moves. So awesome. Thank you, everybody. Everyone have a wonderful public holiday tomorrow. I know in an agent's life there's no such thing, but you can at least just have a braai to enjoy it a little bit. And that's it. Thank you to Charlotte for hosting. You've done an amazing job. Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure to
Awesome.
share our
It was
knowledge
really
with
lovely.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Pleasure.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.